Hey, welcome back. Another battle report for the channel. So this is Dread Elves facing off against Beast Herds, and an opponent at the tournament notified me of the Dread Legionnaires in a Cult of Nab army actually being quite potent. So with Dread Elves, you have to fill your core in some way, and one of the ways is to use Dread Legionnaires, and Cult of Nab gives them hatred. And if you include a Cult Priest in the unit, then they still maintain their killer instinct of the reroll once to wound. There has been several iterations of the list going on online, but I thought I would just give it a go myself too, and see what kind of play I would get with this type of list. So yeah, the kind of Cult of Nab aspect that's going on in the list is, yeah, I cannot have any model other than of any cult other than Cult of Nab. So that means no Dark Acolytes, World Cult of Yema upgrade, no Dancers of Yema, no Medusas, no Dark Raiders, no Raven Cloaks, no Tower Guard, I believe. Yeah, so in the end, it's this army list that you see. So I have a Dread Prince with a Great Weapon and Death's Kiss, which brings him to Strength 7, and he has multiple wounds 2 against anything. So that's, yeah, there's no discussion about that. He's gonna probably go into the unit of Dread Legionnaires. He's Cult of Nab too, so he has Hatred. If he's in the unit, he also keeps his Killer Instinct, so he has 4 attacks that likely hit on a 3+ because of his high offensive skill. And Agility 7 with Hatred, with Strength 7, with reroll once to wound with multiple wounds 2. So yeah, he hits kind of hard. Yeah, then we have a Cult Priest in the unit with the Banner of Gardaikos, so that everyone in the unit gets Death Trance in the first round of combat. So that also applies to the Dread Prince. So effectively he's striking at Strength 8 even. Then we have the Legionnaires. The Legionnaires, there's just 41 of them with spears. So if your opponent charges in, you strike likely first at Agility 7. With Hatred, if you're in Horde formation, which is probably what I'm gonna do with this unit, you strike 4 ranks deep. So you have Hatred, you have +1 to wound, so effectively Strength 4. Normally from the spears you have AP2. If the repeater auxiliaries with the Academy banner are close, you go to AP3. And you have reroll once to wound. So just that basic setup already dishes out quite some harm. And then you have the supportive magic in the form of an oracle on witchcraft. Yeah, and then to round out the list, I mostly just brought units that kind of work well on the flanks. So the Raptor Chariots, the Dread Knights, also the small units of Dread Judges. I became quite a fan of those because they also dish out quite some damage. And then some Hunting Chariots to just hunt the big stuff. So my opponent's list is a Beast Herd list that is very akin to an ETC style list. So he made some alterations to the list that he found online, most notably the Soothsayer being Wizard Master on Shamanism instead of Druidism. For an army list that is going to go for the draw, Druidism is arguably better. But if you just want to have some fun and if you want to just kick some ass, then Shamanism is probably the law to go. Also, +1 strength on the raiding chariots on the charge, for example, is quite interesting, of course. Then he switched in the wild ones that he usually had with ambush for longhorns with ambush, and they're quite cheap. It's just 160 points for a unit with halberds that strikes at strength 5. That's quite scary. And then the obligatory double gore attack. Yeah, so I didn't take any pictures of Magic or the armies this time, even though my opponent's army actually looks, yeah, quite good actually. So yeah, my army is still partly unfinished, so we'll just keep that for next time. So let's get into the battle. We're playing Refused Flank with Spoils of War, and I started deploying So I deployed a chariot, and then my opponent decided to drop. And him dropping just at this first opportunity surprised me a little bit, because I felt that there were some matchups that I'd rather prevent. Like, I didn't really want the raiding chariots to charge into my legionnaires and to cause a lot of damage there, so that other choices in his army could later get rid of the unit. So I was very happy to see that the placement of, for example, the raiding chariots was going to be fixed. Because in my mind, well, with the character that does multiple wounds too, with his 4 attacks, I can probably take a charge of a Gorgon and something else. Because also the Dread Legionnaires themselves will strike first, and I was expecting them to dish out quite some damage on their own, or at least in the first turn of the combat, where they do have the hatred bonus and they do have the death trance bonus for the +1 to wound. But anyway, my opponent decides to drop, and yeah, very clearly he just puts the raiding chariots on one side, the minotaurs on the other side. So I would say that he kind of evenly spreads out his force. With the Gortax, yeah, the right or the left Gortak in the picture here could still move over to the left of the left side of the buildings. The right Gortak is most certainly gonna stay on the flank there. So by now he has deployed everything that he has to deploy, and there's quite some interactions in his list also. So he has this BSB with the Greater Totem that gets a +1 to cast, or on the rolls, or on the bound spells when he's in a forest. He still has a Seed of the Dark Forest on his mage, so he can put down a forest somewhere, but still these guys have to be close enough to each other to be able to pull this off. And then there's the BSB and the general for the primal fury rerolls and the frenzy check rerolls, and also some other stuff that I honestly don't remember all of it anymore. But yeah, so you see me deploy at the top in the meantime. I'm a judge that yeah, so the Legionnaires, I would like to counter them or counter with them the Minotaurs and the Gorgons, rather than the raiding chariots. And I think it's inevitable that an encounter will happen there. So I would say it's quite a simple deployment in its own. I just have the Legionnaires as a kind of point and click unit to just counter my opponent's army here. Then the Dread Knights are on the flanks of the Legionnaires. The hunting chariots are in the middle of the field, where they can still threaten the entire board. I have a unit of Dread Judges all the way on top to counteract the ambush of my opponent, and the same goes for the Raptor Chariots and Dread Judges all the way on the bottom. So then my opponent uses his Vanguard, which I unfortunately do not have in this list, but he tries to put up some pressure right from the get-go, and yeah, in his turn he basically just comes at me. And yeah, I think that is probably what my opponent should have done. He doesn't have any ranged output other than a Totemic Summon, but if he's gonna stay at a long distance from me, I might be able to put in some damage from the Hunting Chariots and from the Repeater Auxiliaries, and use my Witchcraft to get around him. So probably it's a good thing that he just went for it. But I would say that, yeah, due to the drop, and this is him placing the forest, by the way, due to the drop that he did, he kind of forced himself into some uneasy matchups. Like, yeah, the chariots and the knights, then it really depends who's going to get the charge, I would figure. And I still have a chariot on the left that can just also be sacrificed together with the harpies. So I would say on the left flank I'm actually quite okay. On the right flank it's really the question of what's gonna happen whenever these two Gortaks and the Minos and maybe even something more charge into the Dread Legionnaires. Because that is probably, yeah, most likely that's just gonna happen. So I would think that he'd rather just combo charge into my Dread Legionnaires, um, so that I have to fight multiple threats at the same time. And that's actually, yeah, it's not the worst for me, because then that means that I get a first round combat bonus against all of these targets instead of just the one of them. So my opponent has a very sturdy BSB. So I'm just thinking out loud now that maybe he should have just put the BSB in the combat with the Dread Legionnaires, but then my Dread Prince is gonna strike with AP4, and he does have the Dusk Forged with a 2+ armor save, I believe. But then again, he would be re-rolling armor saves on a 6+, so, and any wound that goes through is double wound, so that wouldn't be a solution to this unit either. Yeah, so normally for Dread Elves, and also a list like this, ranged output of your opponent is a big issue. In this matchup, my opponent doesn't have any ranged output to speak of. So yeah, I would say that it is maybe a bit of a difficult situation for him. So he is going to be able to hit me, and he's going to be able to get the rerolls to hit and stuff. And but I'm going to strike first in a lot of places, and yeah, he doesn't have a lot of durability in his army also. Like the Gorgon, or the Gortak, it's nice. It's like 6 wounds at resilience 6, if I'm right, and it can get wounds back. But with Dread Elves, if you really get the charges off that you want to, then 6 wounds at resilience 6 should be doable, or at least over 2 turns. Yeah. So yeah. First turn he chaps my knights on the top and my chariot, and also on the left he chaps the chariot and the red judges. And now he just puts out some supportive magic. Also the Razor Tusks, they moved up to either threaten my units or to serve as a bit of bait. So I would say that probably my Dread Legionnaires should charge into one of these Razor Tusks. And then, yeah, the Dread Knights on the left, I wouldn't really want to charge the Razor Tusk with those, because then you get the counter charge of the Raiding Chariots, and yeah, that's not really something I would want to go for. So it's I do have some choices to make here, because with the Hunting Chariots I can either just focus fire onto the Razor Tusks to remove them from the field and also make the pressure a bit lighter on the Hunting Chariots themselves. But these Razor Tusks, they have 3 wounds, and I only do D3 wounds, I believe. So and they don't get any penalty to the movement from the shots because they're not towering presence. So it's definitely not the ideal target for the Hunting Chariots. And yeah, just a strength 7 hit at a Gortak. That's an infantry model, I believe, so it doesn't have swift stride. Would get me a couple of wounds on a model that is very nice to have a couple of wounds on already, and also would decrease its movement a little bit and then you can combine it with the witchcraft magic to diminish the movement even further. So if you have one of the Hunting Chariots that hit some wounds, the Gortag in the middle, and you put the hereditary of the witchcraft lore on that same guy twice, then you're looking at a -4 movement penalty, which is really substantial, because that would mean that most likely he will not charge very far in the next round. But on the other hand, we're already quite close to each other. Yeah, so my opponent, he thought that he should flee with the hounds on the left, but then he didn't realize that I could charge also with a chariot against it, and then he would flee even further, and then the field would be open for my army basically. So we just put it back, and he held instead to a brave charge of my dread judges that were in for killing some hounds. Yeah, and otherwise I just do some reorganization of my lines, just to be ready for the next turn where probably everything's gonna go in already. I do charge in my raptor chariot on the top into his dogs, because I was looking at the overrun, and I could, if I roll high enough, overrun into the Gotar. And that would also mean that I can put it in such a way that the Minotaurs are not going to be able to charge into my Legionnaires next turn because they can't make the wheel. So, and I would say that currently I am in a bit of a tricky situation where there's a lot of stuff of my opponent that can charge me. If I can reduce that to like half of the stuff that can charge me, then it's probably going to be fine. If I can't, then I don't really know. So we Ravens wing up the Golden Knights on the top to the right. I was very grateful for my opponent to let me do that, but then he figured that he had still some ambushes, and he could chaff me with an ambushing unit anyway, which is fair. Yeah, and otherwise I believe I don't get the random movement. I believe I just get the -2 offensive defensive agility on the Minotaur block. And shooting doesn't really do a lot. We're looking at the repeater auxiliaries. So that's quite a big unit. It has quite a big footprint. It needs quite a big field of vision. And I was planning to just shoot at the Gotark in the middle of the field, but then the Razor Tusk is in the middle between these units. So that would mean that I get a lot of soft cover penalties actually to shoot at the Gotark. So I didn't really want to do that. Which is, yeah, it's kind of, I don't really like how this unit of repeater auxiliaries performs right now, because you have such a broad unit, you're always going to be in your own way. You don't have any volley fire, so yeah, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Maybe it's just the deployment here, but probably it's going to be a unit that's going to be bunkering behind the Legionnaires from time to time. And then your field of vision is just so restricted by the big unit also, that it's very easy for your opponent to make sure that the unit can't really see any valuable targets. Then we go for the hunting chariots. They shoot, but they both, I believe one of them hits but fails to wound. And then it's my opponent's turn. He charges in with the Razor Tusk. My hunting chariot flees. He redirects. He manages to redirect onto the other one. It also flees. And yeah, this is also one of the ways in which hunting chariots just fail to perform, I would say. So they can't even hold a charge against something like a Razor Tusk, because not only he just might smack the entire chariot down, also the crew on the chariot is not that, doesn't have the potential to just hold up its own against such a model even. And then you're gonna rally, you're gonna lose a shot, and then afterwards it's like turn 3 or 4. Yeah, it's I don't think they're really practical in this type of list, at least. So yeah, if you can make your opponent's charges way more unforgiving, then it might be worth it. But in this type of list, it doesn't really work. So what else? Yeah, the chariot does manage to kill the feral hounds and does manage to overrun into the Gotark. So my opponent charges in with Minotaurs into the flank of my chariot. The other Razor Tusk charges in onto my knights, and I decide to stick because I figure that with 2 knights in supporting ranks and 3 knights in the front rank, yeah, so I'll get a total of 5 attacks. Because one of the supporting knights cannot strike, but I do have a champion, so I have 5 attacks that hit him on a 2+, that wound him on a 4+, with a rerolls 1 to wound, and then I still have 3 cold ones. So I was figuring that, yeah, chances were quite substantial that I would just remove this Razor Tusk from the field actually in the first round of combat. Yeah, and then we go to the remaining moves of my opponent. So he puts on the ambushing unit too wide in front of my Dread Knights. So they're going to be too wide just to prevent me from being able to charge into the flank of his Gotar, because probably that would kind of hurt. Just a full flank charge into the Gotar. But that's, yeah, I don't really know if this was really worth it, because yeah, my opponent is going to rack up the chariot, and if he just faces my knights with the Gotar, I can only have 4 knights that can strike, so 5 attacks with the champion. I can do a couple of wounds, probably he's going to do quite some wounds back. He might be able to make his roll to heal, and I don't really know if I would win that grind. On the other hand, I could cast the Wheel Turns, and to just be able to wound him, hit him and wound him on a 4+, and for him to hit and wound me on a 4+. I don't know if that really evens out the odds in my favor, but that could be a solution, because I still have the lightning reflexes going after, and the reroll wants to wound. Yeah, and then also the gold ones, they also wound on a 4+. That's also quite a substantial thing there. What else? So yeah, there's magic going on. Yeah, with shamanism, I often find that my opponent really wants to cast Totemic Summon and Break the Spirit, and then Awaken the Beast somewhere. Usually I'm fine with Awaken the Beast, because, well, for example, with the chariots couldn't die anyway. Totemic Summon, I hate Totemic Summons, just because they can be so annoying, and they can get in the way, and they can just hold up your unit. Like if you get a Totemic Summon that can charge into the flank of my auxiliaries there, you're just pushing my mage to the ground, pinning him in place, and also preventing the shooting. So that would be, for example, a very annoying way of playing this Totemic Summon. Yeah, and Break the Spirit, yeah, it's really a good spell, especially on units like my Dread Legionnaires that want to go somewhere and don't have Strider. Yeah, but I'm also fine with him charging into me, because the only difference is that he will get some impact hits, and I don't remember what he cast now, but yeah, I don't remember. But yeah, so if he would cast Break the Spirit onto my Spearman, I think I would very much want to dispel it, but maybe Totemic Summon would even be the one that I would rather dispel. So in combat, we have the Razor Tusk against the Knights. He kills 2 Knights, and I only managed to do 1 wound. So that was quite unfortunate, yeah. But in combat with the Minotaurs, the Chariot does manage to do something like 2 wounds onto the Gotar. But then the Minotaurs and the Gotar, they completely annihilate the Chariot. So my opponent didn't reform the Gotar there, which is to me quite an important point to note, because like this I can just charge in with the Dread Knights onto his Longhorns, remove them from the field because they're only too wide anyway, and then just stay where I am basically, just to keep the pressure on the flank. So that was definitely a mistake by my opponent. Meanwhile, the Hunting Chariots, they both do manage to rally, but I'm still in a little bit of a pickle with the Knights, just in the position where they are, because yeah, the Chariots are gonna most likely charge next time. So I do move up aggressively with my Dread Judges and Raptor Chariot to also put pressure onto his chariots to get out of where they are, and as the ambushes are out on the field, because the second ambush is on the top left behind my Hunting Chariot. The Dread Judges that were on the top protecting my rear we're now free to get away from the defensive position. I do charge in on the Razor Tusk with my Legionnaires, just to remove the speeds from the game. And this is also the turn where I use my Harpies to chaff up my opponent's Beast Lord on the Chariot, because I figured that, yeah, if I let this guy just roam freely, then it's not good. And maybe I'll get a shot in next turn with one of the Hunting Chariots that's not going to be charged by my opponent's Longhorns that arrived out of ambush. And that would be kind of neat if I at least managed to do a couple of wounds there. So then in the magic phase we continue to just debuff his units with Witchcraft lore. And Witchcraft it's a very funny lore, because you have this random movement spell that effectively cancels a charge somewhere, because most people put their charges at distances where they're like movement +7 or +9 away. If you take off your opponent's movement practically by giving them 2d6 random movement, they are not gonna make that charge anymore. So usually that is the spell to stop, but that's only also the spell with just 18 inches range. So that's a bit annoying. I could put a Wandering Familiar on the mage instead of the Magical Heirloom. Maybe that's better, but then I only have 4 spells, so then I would need some extra caster in there. Yeah, so the other spells with Witchcraft, you have the -2 offensive, defensive, and agility. And yeah, that's a very interesting lore with an army where you do have already quite high agility, but sometimes if you encounter something that has even higher agility, then that's a very useful lore spell. And also, depending on the offensive and defensive of your opponent, it might make the difference between hitting on or being hit on a 4+ or 5+ even. But yeah, normally I would prefer to also have a Medusa in the list, just to have the bounce spell version of it too, so that you have 2 spells that can lower the enemy's agility. But it's Cult of Nap army, you cannot. And otherwise you still have the battle focus on your close combat attacks, which I don't really value that highly. Raven's Wing is an amazing spell, I would say, just to improve your movement phase a little bit more. And then there's the spell that just puts -2 to cast on your opponent's wizard, and doesn't allow him to make any shooting attacks. That's also a very nifty spell. And Wheel Turns is also, yeah, there's just a couple of good spells in there. Anyway, my opponent's turn 3 by now. He decides to charge in with everything into the Dread Legionnaires. So one of these Gortags has gotten a negative modifier on his movement, I believe. And the Minotaurs, they do have the -2 offensive, defensive, and agility. So whilst normally they would probably, I believe, hit my guys on a 3+, now they're hitting on a 4+, because they have paired weapons, so I believe they go to offensive 5. Anyway, I just hit them on a 2+, and for me it doesn't really change a lot. But yeah, I didn't have a better target for the spell, to be honest. Yeah, also the Chariots, they went into my unit of Dread Knights on the left that actually did manage to kill the Razor Tusk this turn. And my opponent also charged in the Mongrel Herd on the left into my Dread Judges, because he figured that either way it was gonna happen. And then right now I believe I was still in the forest, so I wasn't going to be steadfast, he figured. But yeah, he kills off a couple of me, because he has spears on his unit, and he has +1 on the charge, +1 strength, I believe. I do manage to kill sufficient of him to just stick around. I believe I don't win the combat. I don't remember, but I believe I don't win the combat anyway. So then we have the combat with the chariots and the dread knights. He kills off a couple of the dread knights, and the remaining knight flees off the table. And my opponent thinks about whether to pursue or not. Yeah, I effectively just have this counter charge ready with the dread judges that are going to completely mutilate his unit if they get into the flank. So his best bet was to just overrun and maybe get into the hunting chariot, and then after resolving that combat we could go off board. He doesn't make it into the hunting chariot, for which I'm very grateful, so my dread judges are free to go into the flank there. And then my hunting chariot gets a couple of wounds, flees, and my opponent pursues but doesn't manage to catch me. So my ideal fantasy here was that I would charge into the raiding chariots, kill all of them with the red judges, and then make the longhorns flee off the table. But they do have an advantage over the wild ones, I believe, where they are discipline 8 and the wild ones are only discipline 7, I believe. But I'm not sure about that. Then we go to the combat in the middle, so my opponent does some impact hits and a couple of the elves die. And then we started rolling, so I did cast the wheel turns onto this rightmost Gorgon. And then we're just debating over this spell, because it says that only your rank and file models, they hit and wound on a 4+, and if you do the bigger version, they also get hit and wounded on a 4+. So I was striking with my Dread Prince here. He's not a rank and file model, so he's not affected by the spell. So he just hits with his attacks. He hits on a 3+ with Hatred. He has strength effectively 8 now, so he wounds on a 2+ with a reroll of the ones to wound, and it's multiple wounds too. So he kills off the remaining 4 wounds of the Gorgon on that Gorgon. And then we go to the unit itself at agility 7, because I have spears, and they actually managed to. I managed to just completely wipe off the Minotaurs of the field. So I do just a lot of wounds, like 14, 13, something like that. But it's exactly the amount of wounds that they had left after the first volley of the repeater auxiliaries. And then luckily for my opponent, the Gortags are stubborn, so he does manage to kill off some legionnaires, and I don't really mind, to be honest. Because I figured that next turn my Dread Prince can just walk over with his 4 attacks that still would hit on a 3+ wound on now a 3+, but still with a reroll once the wound. And just kill the Gortag, so yeah, ideally, hopefully. Yeah, as a response, his battle standard bearer flees away from the situation. And yeah, then we still just have the Beast Lord left that charged into the Harpies. A lot has been going on in this turn. It was definitely a busy turn. But I think it's a turn that kind of decided the game in favor of the Dread Elves. And I don't know if people will expect just a core unit to perform so well. But it's quite a hefty unit, because the unit itself is 650 points, the Prince is 450, I believe, and then the Cult Priest is another 250 or so. So you're looking at a total of more than 1250 points. So that's just a quarter of your army just in this one block. So that is a Death Star, definitely. And yeah, but it does seem to work, most notably because of the witchcraft lore, also just there to shut off any big units that would want to shoot. Because if you're up against a full gun line, you can. I have the banner of the Relentless Company on the unit, so that I can just advance as quickly as possible towards any potential gun lines. And turn 1, you just use all of your magic to either give the biggest shooting threat in the enemy army random movement, or to give it the twisted effigy that it cannot shoot at all. So it might, it might actually work quite well. So now on the top right we have the Dread Knights charging into a totemic summon that my opponent cast last turn. In the middle, or on the left, we have the Dread Judges charging into the flank of the Raging Chariots, and on the bottom we have the the Raptor Chariot charging in on the Mongrels to help out the Dread Judges. And at this point, I realized that the Repeater Auxiliaries, well, this should be the point where they can start just mopping up the enemy, but they are not really mobile, because once you start moving with them, you get a -1 to hit. Everything's going to be at long range anyway, so you go from 5+ to hit to 6+ to hit, which halves your ranged output. So you could cast a battle focus spell on them to get just a couple of extra hits, of course, but I don't really think it's worth it, because in the end, you're with a unit of 20, you're rolling 40 dice. So if you have if you have 6s to hit and battle focus on your shooting, you might get 7 extra hits. But the spell, this hereditary spell of that's the witchcraft number 6, that can give you battle focus on your shooting too. It's also like a 10+ or an 11+ or something like that. So it's either a 3 or a 4 dice spell. Just for 7 strength 3 hits additionally. That is a steep price to pay, I would say, especially if you compare it against something like the Rod of God, or the Grave Calls, or any of these other damage spells. But maybe it shines a bit more if you cast it on the unit and also have a stand and shoot then the next turn, because then you kind of ramp up the damage. And anyway, you cast it against the target, so your entire army can benefit from the battle focus shooting. So maybe that's also a bit of a problem, that I don't have sufficient. I never field with Dread Elf sufficient shooting to benefit from battle focus against one specific target. Yeah. So then we do the combat, and the Lord just kills off the Gorgon, I believe. So, yeah, a Dread Prince with a great weapon and Death Kiss. Yeah, that's a cool guy to have in the unit also specifically. And then actually the general flees away from there, I believe. So, yeah, some of these rolls were quite in my favor. Yeah, but this guy with Death Kiss, he really complements the unit out also fine, because as he's a character that can make way to the front, if someone is gonna magically clip you on a corner with some single model or anything, I think that is sometimes a big issue with units like these Death Stars. You can just walk over with your Lord and just smack down the creature that is there. Because he's just a powerhouse basically. Yeah. So then with the last turn with the Dread Judges, I didn't really want to pursue the chariots on the left, but I failed my restraining test, so I had to, and then my opponent could now flank charge my Dread Judges, which is probably not going to go very well for them. So at this point, looking at the board, I would say that the battle is actually already kind of over. My opponent is never gonna get a scoring unit inside of the lake on the top right anymore. I do have the Dread Judges in the bottom left, which I was really hoping were gonna stick there, so that I at least do manage to get the objective. And yeah, my opponent's big combat threats are just gone from the board, except for his general and his BSB, both on the chariot. The Longhorns, yeah, I was going to try and whittle them down with the shooting from the auxiliaries, and I still have the big block of legionnaires. I did lose my cult priest somewhere in the process, um, but I do have the rest. And then in my turn, I try to charge in the legionnaires onto the chariot, and I don't make it, so I only roll like a 3 or so. Whilst it wasn't even too far of a charge. And yeah, we have a hunting chariot that rallies, but I believe it can't shoot right now yet. We still whittle down some mongrels over time, but they do kill the occasional dread judge. So you can see that the recording skipped a little bit. That's because the maximum time for the recording had been reached, and I only saw it a little bit later. But then the only thing we have had is my opponent's turn with his charges. So he charged into the Dread Legionnaires, he charged into the Raptor Knights, and I decided to stick with the Dread Knights. I decided to stick. In the meanwhile, the Longhorns they fled off the table, or they got whittled down. Oh no, wait. The one unit of Longhorns actually charged into the chariot. They removed the chariot. But they didn't manage to overrun into the Dread Judges. So I still have 2 Dread Judges in the forest, and they are my scoring unit, and they're gonna be the ones to score the objective for me. So the BSB of my opponent is actually quite a tough guy. So mostly because he has defensive 7 also, and his lord also has defensive 8 on the chariot because of the beast axes. So my opponent's beast lord charges in on to my legionnaires. I decide, I believe he did a challenge last round, and now this round I try to smack him down with my Dread Prince, but I just miss all of my attacks because I'm forced to hit from the defensive skill of 8 of his guy, and I believe he found a way of making it distracting. So I actually hit him on 5s only. So that was something that I didn't really see coming with my with this Dread Prince. It's actually quite a sturdy character that my opponent had, but on the other hand, I did manage to win combat a couple of times, like with +2, and my opponent just stuck around. And yeah, that's about it. So this is kind of where the game ends. My opponent still has his 2 chariot characters, his Wizard Master and the Mongrel Raiders, and 1 Longhorn. I still have my lord, my Wizard Master, my big block of Legionnaires, Hunting Chariot. I have a unit of Dread Judges, the Repeater Auxiliaries, and I do have the objective. So in the end, it's 15-5 for the Dread Elves. Yay, victory! So you can see that the recording skipped a little bit. That's because the maximum time for the recording had been reached, and I only saw it a little bit later. But then the only thing we have had is my opponent's turn with his charges. So he charged into the Dread Legionnaires, he charged into the Raptor Knights, and I decided to stick with the Dread Knights. I decided to stick. In the meanwhile, the Longhorns they fled off the table, or they got whittled down. Oh no, wait. The one unit of Longhorns actually charged into the chariot. They removed the chariot. But they didn't manage to overrun into the Dread Judges. So I still have 2 Dread Judges in the forest, and they are my scoring unit, and they're gonna be the ones to score the objective for me. So the BSB of my opponent is actually quite a tough guy. So mostly because he has defensive 7 also, and his lord also has defensive 8 on the chariot because of the beast axes. So my opponent's beast lord charges in on to my legionnaires. I decide, I believe he did a challenge last round, and now this round I try to smack him down with my Dread Prince, but I just miss all of my attacks because I'm forced to hit from the defensive skill of 8 of his guy, and I believe he found a way of making it distracting. So I actually hit him on 5s only. So that was something that I didn't really see coming with my with this Dread Prince. It's actually quite a sturdy character that my opponent had, but on the other hand, I did manage to win combat a couple of times, like with +2, and my opponent just stuck around. And yeah, that's about it. So this is kind of where the game ends. My opponent still has his 2 chariot characters, his Wizard Master and the Mongrel Raiders, and 1 Longhorn. I still have my Lord, my Wizard Master, my big block of Legionnaires, Hunting Chariot. I have a unit of Dread Judges, the Repeater Auxiliaries, and I do have the objective. So in the end, it's 15-5 for the Dread Elves. Yay!